Hello, Algebra 1. Today we're going to be talking about Xbox problems, which this worksheet refers to as X problems. Sometimes you'll even hear them referred to as diamond problems, but in the end, they're all going to be the same. There's going to be a giant X, there's going to usually be two numbers given, and you're going to try to figure out what the other two numbers are. And so the way it works, looking at example 1, is if you look at these two numbers here on the side, right, the 3 and the 2, what we're going to do is we're going to take the numbers on the side, and when you multiply them together, right, when you take their product, you'll get the number on top. And when you take their sum, you'll get the number on the bottom. So again, it's the numbers on the left and right side that you multiply to get the top number and you add to get the bottom number. And so following this same structure, if you look at example 2 here, I'm going to take -4 and +6, and I'm going to first multiply them together. And when I multiply them together, I get -24. If you notice these Xbox problems, there's a little dot right here, right? And that dot is the multiplication sign to tell me that I'm going to multiply the two numbers together. Similarly, on the bottom here, you see this little plus sign, and that's telling me that I want to add -4 and 6. And so when you add -4 and 6, you'll get +2. So at this point, I'm going to go through examples 1 through 3 below. I'm going to just work them out, and you can just work them out with me as well. So here for number 1, I have 2 and 9 on the sides. When you multiply 2 and 9 together, you should get 18. And when you add 2 and 9 together, you should get 11. For number 2, I'm going to multiply -3 and 4. That's going to give me -12. And when I add them up, I'm going to get +1. And for number 3, when I multiply -6 and 3, I'm going to get -18. And when I add up -6 and 3, I'm going to get -3. Those are Xbox problems, right? When they give you the two numbers on the side, you're going to multiply them together to get the number on top, and you're going to add them together to get the number on the bottom. So following the same structure, I want you guys to pause the video, work out 4 through 6, and when you think you're done, press play. All right, let's see how you guys did. So for number 4 here, I'm going to take -5 and -5, and when I multiply them together, I'll get +25. And when I add -5 and -5, I'm going to get -10. For number 5, I'm going to multiply 3 times -4, which is going to give me -12. And when I add up 3 and -4, I'm going to get -1. And for number 6, when I multiply -2 and -7, I'll get +14. And when I add up -2 and -7, I get a sum of -9. I hope you guys did well on 4 through 6. If you made any mistakes, just again, learn from your mistakes. Be very careful here, because you have to be very good at multiplying integers and adding them as well. Now let's look at example 3 above. So for example 3, it's a little different because if you notice here, they gave me the numbers on top and the bottom, but not on the sides. So what we're going to do is we're going to think of two numbers. When we multiply them together, it gives me 12, and when you add them up, it gives me 7. If you came up with the numbers 4 and 3, then you were correct, right? Because 4 times 3 is 12, and 4 plus 3 is 7. And that's how you're going to do those kind of problems, right? You're going to try to come up with the two factors in this case. So looking down, we're going to be looking at number 7 through 9 here. Now, for number 7 here, you want to think of two numbers that multiply to 30 and add up to 13. So I'm going to first start with 2 and 15, right? Because 2 times 15 is 30. 2 plus 15, however, is 17, which doesn't work because I want the sum to be 13. I'm going to try 5 and 6. If I multiply 5 and 6 together, I get 30, but when I add them up, I get 11. So once again, this does not work. Now, if I try 3 and 10, I believe this will be the pair of numbers that work. 3 times 10 gives me 30. 3 plus 10 gives me 13. And that's my answer. For number 8 here, I want to think of two numbers that multiply to 15 and add up to 8. Hopefully you're able to figure them out pretty quick, 5 and 3, right? Those two numbers multiply to 15, and 5 plus 3 gives me 8. Now for number 9 here, I have -12 and 4. So again, you want to think of two numbers that multiply to -12 and add up to 4. But what I like to first do is just list the numbers that multiply to 12. So for example, 1 and 12. Now I notice that one of the numbers has to be negative and one has to be positive, right? Because the product is -12. But my hope is regardless of where you put the negative, there's no way that's going to add up to 4. So whether I put the -1 here, right? I know that's not going to add up to 4. And if I put the negative 1 in front of the 12, that's also not going to add up to 4. And so I know, so for number 9 here, we're going to think of two numbers that multiply to negative 12 and add up to 4. So what I like to do first is I like to just list out the pairs of numbers that multiply to 12. So for example, 1 and 12, right? And I notice that one of the numbers has to be negative. Now if I put a negative in front of this 1 here, that product does give me negative 12. But if you notice, when you add them up, it doesn't give me 4. So I know that doesn't work. Now if I put the negative in front of the 12 instead, again, the product is still negative 12, but I don't get a sum of 4. So I know that this pair doesn't work. So then the next thing I do is I like to come up with the next pair, which will be 2 and 6. And then once again, I'm going to assign a negative value and see what happens. So I'm going to put the negative in front of the 6 here. Now when I do 2 times negative 6, I know that gives me negative 12. But the thing is, when you add up 2 and negative 6, you get a sum of negative 4. I want a sum of positive 4. But whenever that happens, I note that I'm just going to put a negative in front of the other number then. Because if you notice, the product is still negative 12. But when you add up negative 2 and 6, I do get positive 4. So those are going to be the two numbers that we want. So again, be very careful with these negatives because it's so easy to make those mistakes. At this point, it's your turn to try 10 through 12. Let's see how you guys do. So for number 10, you want to think of two numbers that multiply to get 24 and add up to get negative 10. If you put negative 4 and negative 6, you got it correct. For number 11, the two numbers that you want to come up with here would be negative 12 and positive 2, because negative 12 times 2 is negative 24. Negative 12 plus 2 gives me the bottom number, which is negative 10. And for number 12, if you put 9 and negative 3, then you got it correct. By the way, if you put negative 3 instead, if you put negative 3 on the left side and you put positive 9 on the right side, that is still correct, right? And so either answer will be acceptable. So these are your Xbox problems, right? Hopefully you get a general sense of how to do these. You notice that when you're trying to come up with the numbers on the sides, those are always a little bit more challenging. And so you really have to be careful when you're doing these. Going to our second page here, we do have 9 problems. At this time, I want you to take this opportunity to practice and to see how well you can do. So just like we've been doing before, I want you to pause the video when you see your turn, and I want you to work out 1 through 9 on your own. Really be careful here and do your best. So for number 1, I'm just going to write down the answers. Negative 5 and negative 4 would be the two numbers that we want there. For number 2, you will want to come up with 13 and 2 because that multiplies to 26 and it adds up to 15. Now for number 3, you wanted to come up with the number 7 and negative 1 because if you notice, they multiply to get negative 7 and you add them up to get 6. For number 4 here, you wanted the two numbers to be negative 11 and positive 3. For number 5, 15 and 4 would have been the two numbers you wanted. For number 6, you wanted to get 8 and negative 3. For number 7, you would want to get negative 6 and positive 5. For number 8, negative 8 and positive 5. And for number 9, negative 11 and negative 7 would be your answer. How'd you do on these last 9 problems? Hopefully you did a pretty good job. If you made any mistakes, again, make sure you're learning from your mistakes and being very careful. So this is the end of today's lesson. These Xbox problems that we've been doing will be something that's going to come up again in the near future. And so this is something that we want to be very comfortable with. So guys, this is the end of today's lesson. These are Xbox problems. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day.